Maddie, Rose, Andry. Welcome to the Fantasy Grimoire podcast. It is so wonderful to have you on board today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Little naive podcaster over here decided, hey, let me put this on social media that I'm looking for new authors, any bookstagrammers, people that maybe I don't have access to. Thinking it's not going to go very far with my 100 plus followers, and to the point of where I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this, but I don't regret it because it led me to you. I'm very grateful for that because your book, Mortal End, like I read the blurb and I was like, sold. Vampires with a Soul, sold. I was like, I need to speak to her. I need to just pick her brain. So, yeah, that's a very long winded way of explaining to our listeners how we actually know each other because we didn't know each other before that.
Nope, we didn't. Yeah, so Vampires with a Soul, I had to do it.
Well, why don't we actually talk about that a little bit? So, Mortal End is your debut, right?
Yes.
And your
Mhm.
tagline, that one, yes, stunning cover as well. What if vampires had a soul? I just really want to start understanding what is some of the inspiration for this book and how many books do you have planned in this series?
I actually do know that because, one of the most popular questions authors get is, are you a pantser or a plotter? I am a plotter. So my office is really big and all of the walls are chalkboard walls. So
Mm.
it looks like a beautiful mind in here. And I'm actually in a tower. So it's pretty hilarious. But the vampires having a soul. For me, I don't know, a little bit of background about me is I'm actually a medical professional who actually treats traumatic experience. So I do a lot of trauma recovery, and I've been doing it for 20 years. I am absolutely fascinated with vampire. I have a literature degree as well. And what I fell in love with was classic Gothic literature. And this concept of like Bram Stoker, Dracula, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, these kind of things, because I don't know if very many people know this, but Gothic literature actually paved the way for psychiatric medicine.
What? Wait.
Yeah.
Wait. You need to unpack that a little bit because this is the shit I live for on this podcast. I mean,
Mhm.
I've had girlies, I've had people educating me, and I mean, listen, we all read for escapism and all that jazz, but like when you drop a fact like that, I'm like, tell me more. You have my full attention.
Yeah, so I mean, after 20 years of just working with trauma and helping people overcome trauma, and just, for full disclosure, I got diagnosed with complex post traumatic stress disorder at the age of 14. So I have my own traumatic backstory. And if we think about any well-written story, like fairy tales, even in Disney, like everybody, like their parents died or they're orphaned or whatever, we have traumatic backstories, and it's the baseline for any great fairy tale, right? Grimm brothers, all these other things, and we come from this place. We have to have something to rise above. So Gothic literature really was some of the first literature that ever really explored the darker side of human emotion. And when that literature started getting into the hands of its readers, the readers absolutely fell in love with the part of the emotions that got explored in that literature that was not deemed polite for society. So these are those emotions that nobody really ever talked about. They didn't really talk about it with their families. They didn't really talk about it in public, but it got explored in literature. That's what paved the way to psychiatric medicine, because people then started getting a lot more comfortable talking about these darker sides. Jekyll and Hyde's a great example because it's about a man who has this public persona and then this private, haunting persona, right? And when those kind of stories started coming out, people started getting a lot more comfortable saying, yeah, I kind of have this darker side. And that paved the way to psychiatric medicine. um Fascinating, right? And so,
My one series, based on Supernatural Mafia, I kind of put a bit of a spin on it where they all descend from famous monsters, one of them being Jekyll and Hyde. One of the things I do experiment with in the series is I make no apologies for being a pretty shit human, well, human, human being because they're supernaturals, but I take what I want. I make no apologies for it. And if you just end up getting unalived along the way, oh wait, this is not Instagram. I can say killed. Then, well, sucks to be you. You got in the way. And
Yeah.
like, I'm just listening to you explain this. And I wonder if I would have been as comfortable writing about these things if I didn't have this kind of pathway before me.
Right. And that's one of the things that's so fascinating. So, again, where I kind of came into vampires with a soul is if you think about it, vampires in their classic lore, it started way before fiction. Vampires were actually an evil monster that explained things that would happen to villages. People would die from conditions or plagues or blood disorders that they didn't understand medically. And so it had to be this evil, blood drinking, monster that would come in and like decimate this village. And so over time, it got wrapped up into these stories of fiction and explained away some of these things. And I absolutely love it because vampires always started off as humans and humans have souls. And it's like, oh, well, you have to be, soulless in order to be evil. In the work that I do, I'm a strong believer of, we always have these debates about nature versus nurture. And I'm a strong believer that we make monsters, monsters aren't born. And so it's our experiences that we go through in life that kind of break who we are. And at the end of the day, we can't control any of the things that happen to us. The only control we have is how we react to it. So again, when we have these experiences, and I was an extremely abused child. I've had most of my bones in my body have been broken. I've been brutally raped. I'm also a domestic violence survivor. And yet I'm a very happy person.
100%.
Those are things that I'm not uncomfortable talking about. The vampires with a soul. Again, I wanted to give them souls because I wanted their source of their power to come from their souls. Because when it comes to this concept of nature versus nurture, and we make monsters, are they come from being broken from what's happened to them. I feel like through my own traumatic journey and then working with other people who have been through trauma doesn't actually touch our soul. It touches our physical body, and it touches our psyche, which for me is just separate from the soul. And so the lore, the lore in this book is totally different because what happens during the vampiric transformation is that there's a remembrance of every past life, and any power or strength that you carried in those past lives becomes your vampiric power. Um, and they accumulate. It's like this condensing because the soul only dies because the body dies, or the soul only goes on to the next stage because the body dies. Well, when the body becomes immortal, the soul doesn't have to leave anymore. And so it all comes together. And so it's this very new, fascinating vampire lore that I got to play with this concept of reincarnation and what that means. And so I've married, like I've had reviews where people have talked about it's not just supernatural, but it's a philosophical novel as well. And so it's fun just kind of weaving this new lore. And there's lots of reasons for that, but it's fun. It's epic world building for sure.
That's one of the things that I specifically love about urban fantasy, where sure we piggyback off the real world. Okay, so for example, my series is set in Chicago.
Mhm.
I maybe reference things in real life, okay, but when The Rule of the Dam, that's book number one, opens, it opens in Romania in the 1400s. Okay, so to piggyback off what you were saying about the lore of vampirism, I did reference, Vlad the Impaler and Elizabeth Bathory because we know that that's where all these legends come from. Um,
Absolutely.
and, all these things were kind of mixed into what we know today. But at the same time, we also know that humans fear what they don't understand. Okay.
Absolutely.
And that is something that I think is especially true to this day, where if XYZ is a bit different to me, treat it with fear, treat it with anger, all those things. So I love
Mhm.
that about urban fantasy is that sure, we have this baseline, so to speak, but the possibilities are absolutely endless. And that is so fucking cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's absolutely fascinating. It's funny that you say that too, because my book opens up in the 11th dynasty of Egypt.
Oh, oh God, I
Yeah.
love astrology. Like I'm
Yeah.
Luck for that.
Yeah, and so we go to Egypt, we go to ancient Greece. Yeah, there's all kinds of history aspects woven into the book because again, there is almost like that time travel aspect because if you take past life regression concept, right? And my main character is becoming a vampire, then we're traveling through some of her past lives as she's going through her transformation. And I absolutely agree with you. And, we don't understand it, we reject it and honestly, there's a good reason for that because again, with my background, I'm very well versed in neuroplasticity. Our brain fears things that don't feel familiar. It actually trips our limbic system, which is our fight or flight system, that sends us into an amygdala hijack and tells us that, oh, that's unfamiliar, therefore that's safe and it's dangerous and we should avoid it. So when we see humans in the world rejecting something that is unfamiliar or foreign, our immediate reaction is to be like, oh, like that's dangerous, and we reject it because we start to go a little bit in fight or flight. And especially if the hippocampus has filed something away that calls it a trigger because it reminds us of something that we've been through before that caused us harm. So my main character is a psychiatrist, by the way, because that's kind of what I do.
Well, I mean, it makes sense now listening to all these explanations. Just listening to you explain that makes so much sense because I've discussed this on season 1 of the podcast where I don't have any triggers. And in fact, you know what? Give the darkness to me. The more you give me the darkness, the more I'm like, bring it. But what I did learn through reading Zodiac Academy is that I don't, like, I can read it, and I've read the
Yeah.
whole series. I don't appreciate bullying as a plot device because I find it, and this is me individually, I find it a very cheap way to further a story. It's not actually adding anything of value, in my opinion. And now looking back on this, I was bullied as a child, believe it or not. If you meet me in real life, you'll see how super tall I am. So it's a little bit surprising to hear me say that. And sure, I would stand up to the bullies and whatnot, because I was the bigger child. So I could stand up to a bully. But even now, like at this point in my life, if I see someone, especially in the workplace, bullying someone else, I'll say something. I don't care
Hmm.
who you are. I don't care what you've done to me. If I see bullying going on, I'm going to call it out immediately. Because you know what?
Hmm.
Pick on someone your own size. So, like, just
Hmm.
listening to you explain that, and I'm like, oh, that actually makes sense now. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of goes into one of the things that you asked me about on my website, why I have this detailed list of content. It's in the beginning of my book. It's I do have a very detailed content thing. And the reason is because I identify as a Gothic romance author. I feel like people have lost the understanding of what Gothic literature actually means. So I'm just going to say it. Gothic is a subgenre of horror.
But you see, I didn't know that. I just
Like,
thought like I'm thinking of like the Craft movie, like 1999, the Craft movie, and
yeah.
but that was still very mainstream.
Mhm. I think over time, Gothic concepts have like lost their originality. They've lost their like base of where it started. But if you were to actually research, Gothic literature is a subgenre of horror. And really what identifies Gothic is that it has this deep foreboding atmosphere of loss and suffering. And it does touch on death and grief and all of these other harder emotions, and there is usually a love story wrapped up in it. Now, some of your older Gothic stuff doesn't necessarily end in a happily ever after, which is why I identify as a Gothic romance author, because eventually my characters will always end up with a happily ever after. Because for me, like, the real world doesn't promise us that, right? We have no control over whether or not things are going to end up happily for us, but I can write that. Now, I'll be completely honest, I'm going to put you through hell until we get there because that's just life, right? And so, the content guidance is there because I have on page trauma. Like, it isn't just mentioned, it's on page. When I said that my prologue starts off in the 11th dynasty of Egypt, It starts off with this ancient curse that sets up my entire cursed and fated universe. Like, it is an ancient curse. It is the creation of the first vampire in the mortal plane, and it is brutal.
Yeah.
And it's on page pain, about around the loss of a child, and it, for me, there's a reason why. And in the introduction of my book, I actually do put in there that nothing that I ever write about around trauma is for shock value. So anybody who ever picks up anything from me, I will never ever, because of what I do and what I've personally been through, will ever write anything about shock value. Anything I ever write about will be something either I've personally experienced or held the hand of the patient who's gone through it themselves. And I have dealt with women and families losing children to an extreme degree. And the silence around the rage and the suffering and the grief around that is disheartening to me. Like, in the medical community, when a woman has a miscarriage or stillbirth or the death of a child, just a statistical fact, only 10% of marriages make it through the death of a child. I'm a certified relationship coach. I spent a year to work on relationships to help people through trauma. And only 10% of marriages, and it's because we all as humans grieve so differently over loss, that when you have people who have lost a child, they don't understand how the other person is grieving because they don't grieve the same.
Yeah.
And there tends to be a relationship collapse. And part of it is just we're so silent around grief because
Yeah.
it makes us so uncomfortable. There's this amazing quote out there that says, art is meant to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comforted. Yeah, and it's on my website because, again, if you read something that I've written and you've had a disturbing life, there's a really good chance you're going to find comfort in my pages. And I've literally had people who have lost children who have read my prologue who have reached out to me and said, thank you for writing this because I feel seen and I feel heard. And then I've also had people who have reached out to me and said that it was the most disturbing thing they've ever read in their entire life. And I always go back to that quote that is, my job as an artist, you're an artist, writers are artists, right? It's my job in any kind of craft to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comforted.
Well, this is a big thing for me as well, because just to reference what you're saying about the grief, now looking at my genetic testing, it explains a lot about how quickly I process things. And like, even I can recognize it's faster than the average human being. Now, the reason
Mm-hmm.
why I bring that up is because I felt a lump here at the side in the beginning of the year, right? And then we're like, it's probably nothing. I'm going to go get it ruled out because I do have cancer in my family. Clearly it was something, so just as well we did. But after we went through the whole discovery phase, I'm like, okay, cool, there's a plan, let's go. Okay, because if I have information to latch onto, I'm like fucking bull in china shop. And my husband and I, we were speaking about it, like, and sure, do I grieve the life I lost along the way because the person I was no longer exists? Chatting to my husband, I realized that he needed a lot more time to get to that place that I was at, because he just processes things in a very different way to me, and he needs a lot more time to
Mm-hmm.
kind of wrap his head around that, and that's completely okay. But to your point, the subject of cancer, in my case, makes people so uncomfortable. And I
It
actually said to
does.
my husband once, if I hear one more fucking time someone go, oh, but they mean well, okay, like, I'm sorry, I'm the one with cancer here. When has this come about, you needing to mean well and me keeping my mouth shut about it? Like, I'm good at this.
Can I piggyback that for just a second? I've done a lot of motivational speaking around just how we function and how we process, how we get over trauma and things like that. And I've done a lot of that over the years. And I was doing a basically TED Talk inspired talk around abundance and how I had attracted so much abundance in my life, because I've actually been homeless twice. I moved out when I was 15. When I say I had a brutal childhood, I really did. And
Not
I
gonna.
really, I really did. And now I just like, I've thrived. I've run some very successful businesses and, like I've always wanted to be an author and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to make this happen now that my kids are a little older. And so I was doing this preparation for this, how to attract abundance into your life. And I really started off with the definition because I'm a words person. And I think it's really odd. The Webster Dictionary is that the definition of abundance is having more than you need,
Yeah.
which is weird. But I was doing this prep and I was talking to some people that I was prepping for this talk. And I was talking about my story and the fact that I had been brutally raped and stabbed. And it was one of the things that I had overcame. And I had somebody literally look me in the face and tell me that I shouldn't talk about being raped because it was going to make other people uncomfortable.
Yes, I hope it does actually. Like that's the point.
Exactly. So, like, I mean, and when I say like rape, the statistically, people are raped by somebody they know. And yes, it was somebody that my family knew, but like raped and stabbed. I thought I was going to die and all this other stuff. And so it was one of those things where it was like, for somebody to look at me and say that my story and the pain that I had to endure might make somebody else uncomfortable.
That's my response.
It's like, I was like, it's exactly what you're saying. Is that it's just I got to take this moment and
But obviously, like our two, let's say, scenarios are very different, but it comes down to, in my opinion, the same thing of we'd had power taken away from us.
Mhm. Yeah, no control. There's no control in either of those situations, which is how they kind of piggyback off of each other.
Exactly. And there are certain things we can do to regain that control. And that's why I'm very comfortable keeping this discussion in a way that like suits you in this, because for me, those are like little things we can do to give you back that control, telling your story on your terms.
The trigger warnings are on there. They're in the book. They're on the website with hyperlinks because again, as somebody with complex post traumatic stress disorder, I've walked that road of recovery. No longer do I have symptoms of them, but I also work with patients that do have that condition. I do specialize in PTSD, developmental trauma disorder, complex post traumatic stress disorder. I don't ever want to trigger anybody. I want them to know what they're getting into. That said, one of the parts of your questions that you sent me was, where does the author's responsibility lie? And I'm just going to put this out there. In all of the trauma recovery that I've done, we have to take responsibility for our reactions to everything. So many things happen in our lives that we have no control over. Whether you're religious or not, Buddhism is a philosophy, and one of the noble truths is that all humans will suffer. Period. We have no control over those catastrophic sufferings that we will go through, whether it's bad weather, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a car crash. There are things that happen in our lives. We'll lose a loved one. We have no control over those things. What we do have control over, another noble truth, is humans perpetuate their suffering. And that's where we can intervene because we can decide how we react to something. So the responsibility on the author is to say, here's the list.
Mhm.
Read it, don't read it. Like you've already mentioned, you don't have triggers. I don't have triggers. The only trigger that I know that I have is animal harm. So if there's going to be animal mutilation, I'm not going to read the book. I can't do it, right? Everything else. And I think it's because I'm a little jaded. I've been in the medical industry for over 20 years. Like I've sat at the bedside and watched many humans die and held their hands while they did it. So I do have a little bit of a darker understanding of our mortality. And that's just one of the side effects of my career. At the same time, like I feel for me, my responsibility to just say, hey, this is in here. It's on page. Okay. I want you to know that you're getting into this. If you have any of these things or any of these things have happened to you because of what I do for a living, here's
Yeah.
help
Yeah. I
because I
saw.
want you to get help.
Yeah. I
yeah,
saw.
I want you to get help. And at the end of the day, that's where the author's responsibility stops.
Yeah.
Because if a reader decides to go ahead and read after that's been out there, then your reaction as a reader, and I read over 200 books a year on top of writing and on top of everything else I do. If I have a reaction to a book that reaction was in me to have.
Yeah.
It belongs to me. And that's the reason why so many people can read the same book and they will have a different reaction to what was written.
Maddie, I do want to ask you, what's your hot take?
Oh, my hot take. So I'm gonna go with you a little bit on the bullying. So as an indie author, our biggest putting on that marketing hat and social media being the way that we share what we're doing and the fact that that kind of puts us out there, um, this constant witch hunt around everything. And AI is out there. AI is going to be out there. It's the way of life anymore, right? It's not going anywhere. And not just with that, but with other things. I know one of the things, and my hot take ties into the other question, like, Allie Hazelwood and what happened with her. Like, she
Yeah.
had an opinion
Yeah.
and it got taken out of context.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have an issue with the fact that, like, stop accusing people. I'm just going to say it. I fucking love M dashes. So if
Yeah.
I see one damn more post about the fact that M dash is a sign of
Yeah.
AI, I'm
Yeah.
just going to blow my mind. And just so everybody knows, there are apps where you can actually take a page of content and scan that page of content into the app, and it will tell you whether or not it was human written or generated by AI. If you take a page from my book and scan it, it will tell you it was 100% written by a human. And there are a fuck ton of M dashes in this book.
AI is just one thing. I've seen the SJM fandom come after people, the bullying thing. Like, I have seen people come in droves. Now, I think it's important to make a distinction that holding someone accountable for their poor behavior is one thing, because you
Yeah.
can do that in a very respectful manner, versus
Mm-hmm.
bullying. And I'll give two examples, right? So recently, at the time of recording this episode, we had a bookstagrammer, I will not mention her name, who did a paid advertisement for AI character art. And that was not her first, I was going to say, infringement. It was strike three. So Bookstagram was calling her out left, right, and center, and she got very defensive. Now, my request for everyone is that if you find yourself in hot water like this, take a step back. Don't come out swinging, because all you're going to do is make it worse. Okay, PR 101. Then we had another author, like literally 2 or 3 days later, start freaking the fuck out at everyone about AI, completely breaks AI down. She completely explained AI incorrectly, by the way. She's like, oh, your robot vacuum runs on AI. And I'm like, I mean, sure, there probably are some ones that do, but like that, no, that's really not the takeout here. And then she was like, and then she's like, and your bank runs on AI, and the world runs on AI. And we're like, okay, generative AI versus assisted AI are two very separate things. You're confusing the subject, and leave her alone. And I'm like, okay, did you just tank your whole author brand on purpose? Like, what were you going for in this? So yeah, I totally agree. We spoke about this offline, but like, the M dash was created somewhere in the 1500s. AI was not there around at the same time.
Nope.
So for me, like, having these kinds of conversations is so important, because we're almost like not giving the bullies the power over us. And back the power thing, it keeps coming up. Um,
Yeah.
because, okay, cool, you want to accuse us? Where's your evidence? Show me.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and the thing of it is it's like, I've also seen issues around AI art and stuff like that. And I mean, it's everywhere. And if somebody makes a post about my book, I mean, I'm not going to police every post that gets made. I don't have time. But all of the art, like, my book has artwork in it, like, and
Yeah.
so does the second book. So, like,
Yeah.
there's art in my book. It's all hand drawn. Like, the artist that I work with, she did my cover. She did the cover for the second book. She's actually a traditionally published author herself, who is an artist. She's actually, her degree is in a classic portrait art. So she's phenomenal artist. And so I get a little frustrated sometimes. I've had some other authors reach out and say that they didn't even want to do a giveaway with me because there was a post on my site where I collabed with somebody who used an AI image in the post. Like they just collabed me and I accepted it because I'm not going to sit there and nitpick every single thing that somebody posts because they're like, oh, well, she uses AI. And I'm like, if you knew how much money I've spent paying a traditional artist for everything inside my book is done by a human. And it's just like, and so it's that kind of thing. Like, you're not an educated person when you come at somebody saying, oh, you've done this, because there's a social media post where somebody snagged an image somewhere and put it on. And like, I don't have the time. Like, indie authors are marketers. I mean, oh my gosh, I did the layout and the design cover, like my artist did the image, but the font and the layout and the back cover text. And I did all of that myself. Like every single hat that I have to put on, like I am not going to police every single post that goes on social media. Sometimes I don't even see them.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's insanity. So when it comes to that kind of hot take for me is it's like, as an author, you become a public figure somewhere along the line. The rest of the world stops allowing us to be humans and they expect this concept of perfection. So anything that somebody says gets taken out of context, which I feel is that's what happened to Allie Hazelwood. She made a comment, which was an opinion, and she was jokingly saying it, which, by the way, we get to have opinions now, especially about fictional characters. She wasn't bashing a human being. That's just, to me, just madness.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're still people. We still get to have an opinion. We still get to, live our lives. And it's like, whenever somebody becomes in the public image like that, it's like we get held to unrealistic and unattainable standards that just aren't okay,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
This is actually something I've said a lot to, I was going to say, previous guests with kids, where, I'm sorry, the kid's making a noise. I'm like, so what? Most people are like working parents. I get if you don't want to show your kid's face on camera, like that's a separate topic. But okay, cool.
Yeah.
There is noise. Welcome to real life. I get that I don't have a kid. I mean, as you saw, I comfortably grabbed my fur baby now. And I'm like, okay, cool. If she's going to sit and moan, she's not right now, she'll come sit here with us. That's what
Yeah.
we'll That's how we adapt. Maddie, I'm seeing a lot of ongoing discussion about bookstagram etiquette. So the classic example is don't tag authors in bad reviews. Now, in my opinion, this is subjective because for some people, a 3 is bad. For me, I have some phenomenal 3-star reviews. So I'd like to know, what are your top tips for this bookstagram etiquette?
Well, I feel like with Bookstagram, if you have an author who has said, don't tag me in a 3-star or don't tag me in a negative review, and they've made the request,
Yeah.
that's a personal boundary.
Yeah.
And I think just to be a decent human being, we should respect other human beings' boundaries, whether they're an author or just somebody that it's a coworker or a friend or whatever. And so I think if somebody is out there that says, please don't do this, they're saying it for their mental health and their well-being. Like you and I have talked about this a little bit. Reviews can be painful. And it's like we do put our heart and our souls in the things that we write. And sometimes people will write reviews simply because they didn't understand our book and it didn't vibe with them. And I'm one of those people as a reader, if I read a book and I don't get it or it doesn't vibe with me, I will never say I didn't like the book. And I also won't give it a negative review because I see that as a reflection of me, not a reflection of the author. Because there was something about that book I didn't like. And so I take responsibility for the fact I didn't like it. And so for me, I take responsibility that I don't want to put that review out there that might deter somebody who might absolutely fucking love that book. And then they won't read it because of something I wrote. That's really about me. Reading is subjective. You said that this is a subjective thing. Reading is subjective. Like people will pick up, and I mean, again, my book has so much stuff going on in there as far as like personal development, and my DMs are open to readers. Like I'm all for them contacting me. But it's so funny to me that I've never really had a reader contact me and say the same thing.
Yeah.
a different part of the story or a different nuance in the story impacts people so freaking differently. And so again, that's where reviews are subjective. If an author doesn't want to be tagged or bombarded with what they deem hurtful, it's for their mental health so they can keep providing art to the world. Leave them alone. Let them do it.
I started as a YA fantasy author and I kind of pivoted into the dark urban fantasy space. It was a very, I almost want to say, organic thing. And one of the things that I kind of positioned in my tagline is that I am writing books similar to the early 2000s, mid 2000s CW era. So think The Vampire Diaries, Gossip Girl, all of those shows. And some, I'll have to be very generic here, but some reviewers have kind of comped my work trashy. Like they haven't called me trash. Like that, like that's not what they're saying. They've just said it's very trashy. And I'm like, well, have you seen Gossip Girl? Like I mean, they're not nice people. Like that was my take on it. I understand everyone has a different perception, but I'm like, I say it's a dark urban fantasy. What did you think was going to happen? Did
Exactly.
you think they were all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, my lord, and live happily ever after? It is very interesting because in some breaths, readers will say, I can see this as the Vampire Diaries, I can see this as a TV show, and other readers will be like, it's okay. And that's fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, it is so wild how the same book can get such drastically different responses.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's subjective. And again, that's what I'm saying. Like authors should have the right to be like, no, I don't want you to tag me in this. And again,
Yeah.
it's just a personal boundary. So you're probably picking up the theme for me. Everything is about respecting somebody else's mental health and well-being, right? Like if somebody says, this is my line, I feel like it is my job as a human being to say, okay, I respect your line. Like that's my responsibility as a human being. If you were to look at me and say, I'm not comfortable with that, it's my job to say, okay, I'm good with that. Like, don't
So
push people.
I actually have a follow-up question for you there, which we haven't discussed, but since you've put such a thing on boundaries, when someone chooses to ignore your boundary, in your opinion, why do you think that is?
Well, if you want, like, from a mental health standpoint, like why people do that.
From a Maddie Rose standpoint,
Oh,
you tell
well, I mean, I think it's hard for me to separate my professional from my personal because again I got diagnosed with PTSD at such a young age and started studying psychiatry at such a young age that I can't really separate the two. But typically when somebody sets a boundary and somebody continues to push, it's because of their early attachment bonds. Everybody has a power bucket and an attention bucket, and usually when you're dealing with children, if you disempower children, they'll act out. That's where you get rebellious behavior. If you're not paying enough attention to a child, they'll do the same thing. Negative attention is better than no attention, so they'll act out. So as a parent, it's your job to make sure that you're empowering your children so their power bucket is full and that you're giving them enough attention so they have no reason to ever really act out or be rebellious or throw tantrums, etc. When I come across an adult who doesn't respect boundaries, what goes on in my head is that as a child, their power bucket and their attention bucket were neglected. And so their way of getting their needs met became to push, to push, to push, to push, to push. So if you think about a parent child or a caretaker to child relationship, is they would do the thing where, the parent would be busy, or the mom or the dad or the grandparent, whoever their caretaker was, and the child would be like, mom, 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 mom. And the parent would just keep ignoring them, right? And then finally they're like, mom. And the mom's like, what? That's kind of like that thing that happens, right? And so what happens with conditioning, and it's unconscious, is children will say, can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? Fine, whatever, just leave me alone. Those are conditionings that were happening. They're really unconscious, but it happens. And so what you're actually teaching that child is that it's okay when somebody says no to keep pushing until you get what you want. So that's what I see humans do all the time. When somebody says, I don't want to do this, and they keep pushing, my brain goes, oh, they grew up with that it was okay to not respect somebody's no.
I find it very interesting that you say that because there are certain, I almost want to say topics as an adult where I'm like, I don't give a shit if you like me or not. If I say no, the answer is no. That's not up for discussion. I'll give you a very simple example where I said at work that I was not comfortable with a certain situation. And I was very much within my rights to say that. It's not like I wasn't trying to do my job. There was just a certain aspect of the job that was outside of my skill set that I wasn't comfortable with. And they were like, well, if you don't take this, then you will never progress. And I was like, well, then that's fine. I'll never progress. I said no. Like, you are not going to emotionally blackmail me into changing my mind. You need to respect that. And then to the point of where they're like, oh, you're being difficult. And I'm like, you don't get to call me difficult because I've said no to you when it did not suit you.
A lot of parents do parenting through fear or through emotional blackmail. So there's that concept where they'll withdraw their love from their child to get the child to do what they want them to do. Because at the end of the day, we don't have control over anybody. As a parent, I do not have control over my 12 and my 13-year-old daughter. None whatsoever. It goes back to those early attachment bonds. So I'm actually a very patient human being. I'm a very compassionate human being because usually when I see behaviors like that, like I know that either that person probably grew up with a parent who would withdraw their affection or parent through fear or do something like that. So unfortunately, like that's just my lens on how I see the world. So I am not a reactive person. When somebody does something like that, I'm like, whatever. One of my mantras that I try to give people all the time is a person's behavior is a reflection of them and not a reflection of you.
And on that note, I do have to ask you.
Yeah.
Anne Rice is, and I know you were referencing some of these authors in the beginning. Anne Rice, she is seen as having paved the way for modern day urban fantasy authors with her success. If we look at Interview with the Vampire, that's a classic example, and it's very familiar. I mean, Lestat, we all know him, we all love him. What do you think she did right that we can try and emulate for our work today as urban fantasy authors?
Well, one of the things that I absolutely loved, and I should have sent you that review. I've actually been compared to Anne Rice and Emily Bronte, which I was like, I saw that review come in, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hit the mother lode. And with having a literature degree and studying all of these people, when I was younger, that was really huge for me. But I think one of the things that she did really well was she really did embody the vibe and the feeling of Gothic literature and that dark, foreboding side of the human emotions, kind of like what we talked about, was just that pain and death and, the despair and all of these things that lend to that atmosphere of what's lurking in the shadows, right? And she kind of teleports us into the scene. And so she takes the modern day era and she transforms it so brilliantly. So it's like, even though it's a world that we think we understand, it makes you be like, but do we?
I feel like she's not limited by her imagination. If we look at Lestat and his journey, I thought it would have been a predictable story. And sure, at times they are like, okay, fine, I saw that coming. But then there's times I was like, oh, how did that happen? So it's not a shock value per se, but it's almost like the bravery to talk about these difficult subjects that you're referencing
Mhm.
that leaves that lasting impression on us.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, and that's where I wish more people would write in that Gothic vein. But I think there's this huge misunderstanding that Gothic has to take place in the past or it has to take place in a Victorian space. And so she was writing urban fantasy. But if you think about like Dracula, it took place, if you take Bram Stoker and he wrote it in his current time. Just like Wuthering Heights was written in its current time. But if we look at it and we're like, oh, that's Gothic literature, and in order for it to have that, it has to be in this haunted castle or during the Victorian period. And I think that's why New Orleans was perfect for her stuff because it has that old world kind of feel. I think it's more the feeling, it's the atmosphere that we're trying to create with urban fantasy. Like my book takes place in Eugene, Oregon, but there is this kind of like, the redwood forest is like this ancient mystical kind of thing, but they live in a Tudor style castle that's been magically crafted. And so you can give it that dark foreboding thing and that environment with just the way that you weave the story. And it is just, you want that mystery, you want that looming air of like death and not really knowing where you're going. Um, and I think that's what Anne Rice did so well. I mean, freaking loved it, right? You always craved more. As humans, we really struggle sometimes to, again, it goes back to a lot of the things. That's why I'm a gothic romance novelist, because we struggle to accept our own shadow parts. And that's why I write about it. And all of my characters, that's what they're dealing with. They're the parts they don't like about themselves.
I do ask all my guests the question: name one fantasy book that you believe deserves far more love than it's been getting.
Oh, this is such a hard one for me because my
Yeah.
PA Laura has helped me figure out that, because I write so much fantasy and my stuff is very epic world fantasy kind of thing. When I was reading fantasy too, my brain short circuited. If I don't dip back into reality a little bit, it's too much mysticism and my brain stops functioning. Oh, one that needs. I've been reading a lot of mafia romances actually.
Let's go for it.
For
Tell
mafia romances, I actually just started uh, Mafia's Bride. And I don't have the author's name, but it's new. It just came out in June, and I think she only has like 19 reviews at this point. The Mafia's Bride, and it's E.D.
Crow.
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 E.D. Crow. I will have to say what I'm enjoying about hers, and she's got a novella called The Mafia Princess, and in 62 pages, the character development that she did and her ability to get you emotionally attached to these two characters was really well done. And then I started this one last night, and I got pretty far. She does that kind of dark, gothic-y. These characters are fucking unforgivable, and I love it. I've read a lot of, mafia romance type of things, and like unforgivable type, just brutality type things. I wish more people would go there, because if we would, I'm just gonna out myself again with what I do for a living. There are three hot topics in relationship that people always have issues with, and that's sex, money, and parenting. And it's because everybody's uncomfortable talking about those three things. The more we talk about them, the less taboo they become. And so the more we write around this darker subject matter and the more comfortable we can get around it, the easier life is.
And that's one of the reasons why I write about these topics, is because I almost, just to echo you, it's almost like accepting the darker parts of yourself, and that, you wouldn't be the person that you are without them. Like, it's
No,
completely okay. There was a line there's a moment that happens. It's a pretty violent moment. But the character kind of remarks that he is always amazed by humankind's capacity to love in the darkest of moments. And I was like, hmm. But it's just like
yeah.
that kind of like contrast. It was really something that got me thinking. So, Maddie, what can we expect next from you in your author career? Can you give us a little bit of a preview?
We're going to have more from the Cursed and Fated Vampire series. Chaos Resurrected, September 2nd, 2025. So out.
Yeah.
It is the parallel novel to Mortal End. This has been told from a single point of view with Venice as the point of view. So this is my main female character. Chaos Resurrected is a single point of view told from Emil's point of view, who is my MMC. They share the exact same timeline, and it isn't a retelling. So I've already had some reviews come in, and people are like, oh, this is like the dark diary that's been hidden under the bed, and we all get to see it. There's some more beautiful artwork coming out of that one. Book 3 is underway, and you asked me earlier how many. There will be 7 books in this series, and it's because this is really the series that's lame. When I say the Cursed and Fated universe, you can do with that what you want. This is the Cursed and Fated vampires. There's a Cursed and Fated universe, so I'm laying some groundwork. Books 4, 5, and 6 will be parallel novels as well. I love writing, again, epic world building. I love writing these like overlapping journeys, and For me, a lot of my readers have fallen in love with my side characters because they're not really side characters.
Can we also just take a moment for side characters? They never stay in their fucking place. They always come out. I'm sitting with a side character right now where I'm like, shit, the side character needs like a spin-off duology. I'm
Yeah.
like, I was like, I don't think there's a trilogy there because I typically write trilogies. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just give this character a novella. And the more and more I'm writing my current whip up, okay, a duology. I was like, I think I can do that.
Yeah, if you're anything like me, you'll be with the trilogy
Yeah.
because it's just like, I mean, they just start talking, and I'm like, okay. And that's honestly the funny thing is that's how Chaos Resurrected actually happened, because book 3 was meant to be book 2, and it was going to be a dual point of view, and I had already started it. And I just kept getting this nagging, like, tell my story, tell my story. This was the meal. Tell my story, tell my story, tell my story. And I was like, fuck, okay, I'll tell your damn story. What the hell? And I sat down, and then 5 weeks, book 2 was born. And I was like, nobody wants a retelling of the same shit. And I was like, when I wrote the ending of Chaos Resurrected, I was like, holy fuck, that just happened.
I did that too. People don't understand that as the author. Now, so you mentioned that you're a plotter. I'm a bit of a hybrid. So I started out as a hardcore plotter.
Mhm.
Now I go in with the plan, but I kind of leave room for the organic changes. And I looked at some of the stuff I wrote in my current book and I was like, where the fuck did that come from? I get that this is my story, but even I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
And then I look at the groundwork I've laid, and I'm like, subconsciously, I have been doing that the whole time. It's fucking wild to me. Maddie, I do want to ask if anyone is listening to this episode, they're vibing with your story, they're vibing with you, and they want to connect with you and support you. What are the best ways to do this?
Honestly, my main platform is Instagram. I have a newsletter. I do a weekly newsletter. You can find it on my website, which is just my name, MaddieRoseAndry.com. And Instagram is the platform that I'm most on because it's just, I find it the most user friendly for me. I like to be able to schedule because I do run a medical practice. I still see patients. I have children. And then I do write full time. Just managing one platform is easiest for me. I do try to get to my DMs. If I go silent, it's because I'm in my writing tower. But usually it's not for very long. I'll pop in and out, but that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. The thing when you said about plotting, I am a plotter who is character driven. And that sounds very much like what you're talking about. I'm a plotter who's character driven. So I do outline, but I'll be like, oh, this is where this is going. And then I'll start writing the dialogue. And then this character says this and this character says that. And then by the time I'm done with this conversation, I'm like, how the hell did we get here?
Maddie, it has been absolutely incredible having you on this episode. You know, one of my favorite parts about having guests like yourself, where I didn't really know you that much before this episode, is I woke up feeling like I've gained a friend. And for
Mhm.
me, that is so important because I do this podcast obviously at my own time, out of my own money and everything. And I do this for connection. I do this for community. Granted, I did pick you because I love the Mortal Ends Blurb cover. And that is very high on my TBR. So for selfish reasons, let's go with that. But just to find out that you're such a fucking cool human being along with that, like it's a double win for me. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it and I cannot wait for everyone to hear this episode.
Thank you so much.